Hello and welcome to this episode of India and the World on DeKoder. I'm Nidhi Razdan. Well, what a day it's been in the last 24 hours. There have been fast paced developments on the US Iran war front where both sides have announced that there is a framework peace deal that they have agreed to. We don't have very many details about what it entails, but we have heard that the two sides will actually sit down and sign this deal in Switzerland on Friday. There are some very sketchy details at this point. For instance, that this will be a 60-day ceasefire that will immediately come into effect, that the two sides will then begin negotiations on some of the more tricky issues that are confronting them, including Iran's nuclear program and the issue of American sanctions against Iran. Now, this has been, of course, a very welcome announcement overall. President Trump has said that the Strait of Hormuz will reopen. Now, we're not clear on the timeline of exactly when that will happen, and that no tolls will be paid by anybody to get their oil tankers through. But of course, the sooner that happens, the better. Oil markets reacted very positively to this news. Oil prices have come down in the last several hours. But I think the world is also very tentatively watching to see what happens, A, between now and Friday, and B, after Friday, because this is a very sort of precarious agreement. There are many X factors here. We don't know how these negotiations will go, whether the Americans may consider their attacks on Iran once again if the talks fail. There's the Israel factor, because Israel has said it's not bound by this agreement. It will do what it has to do to protect its interests. And in all of this, we've seen India US ties take another nosedive over the killing of Indian seafarers only in the last few days. India protested strongly. The American reaction was not apologetic at all. And that's a new flashpoint in that relationship. So let me introduce our esteemed panel today, some of the best voices to take us through what to expect now in the days and weeks ahead. Ambassador Mohan Kumar is back with us on DeKoder today, former Indian diplomat, now with the OP Jindal University in India. Thank you very much, Ambassador Mohan Kumar. Dr. Jeff Gunter, he's also a former US diplomat, and he's joined us very early in the morning, his time, and he's in Nevada in the United States. Thank you very much, Dr. Gunter, for being with us. And Suhasini, Haidar, the diplomatic affairs editor of The Hindu, is joining us from Delhi today. Thank you very much to all of you for joining us. Ambassador Mohan Kumar, let me begin with you first. What are your main sort of three takeaways from this framework agreement?
Thank you very much for having me. I think it's an interim deal, and which may lead to a final deal. So that's the first sense I have. The second sense I have is that if we can, if it can lead to a reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, and if the U.S. blockade can be lifted, then I think it's very good for the global economy. So, to that extent, I welcome the deal. But having said all of that, I think a very long haul lies ahead of the parties to the conflict. A lot of imponderables. The biggest imponderable I see is Israel, frankly, which appears extremely unhappy with the deal. I think the Americans want a deal, it's clear to me. And I think the Iranians, while playing hard to get, also realize that they need time, they need money, and they will probably get both of that in this deal. They will get money for sure, and they will get time. So, this is something the Iranians will get. So, I do not see the US and Iran reneging from this deal. I mean, if I can call it a deal. So, the biggest danger I see is Israel, and also the 60-day period during which the negotiations on the nuclear issue will pan out. Because, very frankly, for somebody like me who has followed this issue in the past, it's very hard to negotiate with the Iranians. I mean, I have no problem in confiding to you that I think I must have negotiated with at least 70 or 80 countries in the WTO. The toughest country to negotiate with is obviously Iran, without a doubt. So I think that will continue to be the case for the nuclear issue. But from India's perspective, from a global South perspective, if we can get the Strait of Hormuz up and running, and that's not going to be easy. It's not like you signed the deal on Friday and the Hormuz Strait is going to be open. There's the issue of demining, there is the issue of congestion, there is the issue of US blockade being lifted. And then finally, just to conclude this segment, I mean, Iran says that the toll free or completely free Strait of Hormuz is only for a period of 30 days. And they are saying after that, they will charge some fees, may not be a toll, but maybe some kind of fee. So we will have to take a look at that aspect as well.
So, Dr. Gunter, what is your assessment of this announcement, and what are the reactions like there in America? And I ask this because it seems that whatever the initial goals were of the United States in this war, none of those have been met. There's been no regime change. Iran's nuclear weapons program is still there. Its missiles are still there. Iran showed the world that it could effectively choke the global economy by blocking the Strait of Hormuz. So, what did the Americans achieve?
Well, I think you have to look and see what the objectives were at the beginning of the operation. And what's clear is that Iran will have no nuclear weapon. Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. Their enriched uranium is far deep in a mountain somewhere, and their ability to create a nuclear weapon has been extremely, extremely hampered. So I would put that as a big W for Donald J. Trump. Let's go to their intercontinental ballistic missile capabilities. Extremely, extremely devalued and basically eliminated. Let's talk about our objective of getting rid of their proxies, whether it's Hamas, Hezbollah, or the Houthis. Extremely, extremely debilitated and nearly extinguished. Let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz. The best way to assess the Strait of Hormuz is look at the price of oil right now, somewhere hovering around $85 a barrel. So I would gently push back on my esteemed panelists here. I think it's been an incredible success. We have 13 American lives lost. 6 or 7 were during combat. Will be a textbook example of a war of attrition, not a big confrontational war. And let's face it, America is in the driver's seat right now. Where is the Ayatollah right now? Oh wait, he's been eliminated. Where is the second Ayatollah? Oh wait, he's also in a coma somewhere, unavailable. Oh, where is their navy at the bottom of the sea? Where's the Air Force not flying? They do have a little bit of drone capabilities right now, but let's face it, this has been an unquestionable success
If
for
that
for
was the
you know,
case, if I could interrupt, if that was the case, and the Iranians were really so weakened, and their missile capabilities, their navy, everything was just obliterated and weakened. The fact is, the Americans couldn't get the Strait of Hormuz to open. In these last few weeks, the Iranians effectively were able to choke off the strait and hurt the global economy, including the American economy. Your gasoline prices are significantly up. President Trump's ratings are very, very down, the worst ratings that an American president has ever had. More Americans disapprove of his handling of the American economy today than they have at any other point in his tenure. So the fact is, did Mr. Trump have any other choice but to find a way out?
well, I'm going to gently push back on my esteemed panel here again. The price of oil strongly disagrees with you. It's $85 a barrel. That is not a intolerable amount. Now, the disparity between that and gasoline prices, that's going to take some time for adjust. You just go down the list. President Trump is incredibly popular right now. Look at our 250th anniversary. I promise you, I say it always, always to my great India esteemed panelists and across your country. There will be a time when President Trump and your great Prime Minister Modi will be up on the stage with 100,000 Americans in America and 100,000 Indians in India. And what we are watching is the sausage being made. And it's no fun to watch sausage in diplomacy. Our great panelists understand that. But if you look at it, the world is a much safer place right now. Why? Iran does not and will never have a nuclear weapon. Already, India has neighbors with territorial disputes with nuclear weapons, whether it's China or whether it's Pakistan. And the last thing that India needs for its foreign policy is to have another country in the neighborhood with nuclear weapons. And we all know what that would happen. If you think it's hard to open up the Strait of Hormuz now, give Iran a nuclear weapon and then try to show some leverage there. Not
Except,
possible.
except that, as I said, we're far from that goal of Iran without nuclear weapons. And also, I don't know which polls you're seeing, but the ones I'm seeing show as of yesterday, President Trump's approval ratings is at 39%. It's the lowest approval rating since his first term. This is just one NBC News poll, and you're just 5 months away from midterms.
It's,
But
it's, it's NBC, fake news. I mean, come on. You know I'm a Trumpy guy. You know I'm very skeptical of the mainstream, if you want to call it lack of a
there are
diplomatic term,
multiple
mainstream
polls.
media.
I guess
It's it's
we'll
it's
know his
fake news.
popularity in the midterms, but wait, those elections are probably rigged if they don't go your way either. But
Not
Suhasini,
true.
Heather
That's not what I'm saying. In Florida, no. In Texas, no. In
is very
California, Washington State, and all the other liberal states, absolutely. There's a high probability. If you don't believe me, go ask Spencer Pratt in Los Angeles and go look and see what happened with that election dump.
so Hasni, Heather, your sort of key takeaways from this deal. I also find it sort of very stark to see that there is no India doesn't figure anywhere in this, either as a mediator, facilitator. No one has thanked India. We see ourselves in this very sort of position as being a global leader, a Vishwaguru, as it were. Uh, so just reflect a bit on that, and plus your sort of main takeaways from this.
Sure, and honestly, Ambassador Gunter should be credited with coming on to an international show simply because whatever Mr. Trump's popularity inside the country is, and he is the elected president there. The truth is that there's not a lot of popularity internationally for the war that was taken, was started on February 28th. The world has already seen a lot of economic shocks over the last year. The last thing they needed was a war they weren't expecting, and one that seems to have ended without any of the stated goals, as you pointed out, being met. More importantly, and I want to read from this, Vice President J.D. Vance, who is, either this is going to be completely pinned on him or he will be the hero of the moment if the deal goes through on Friday, has given an interview just a short while ago. And he has said that what this agreement does is twofold. So he himself is saying that there are two big takeaways from the deal. The first is it ensures Iran will never have a nuclear weapon, while simultaneously opening up the Strait of Hormuz. Now, for most of us who have followed the US and Iran's relationship, and particularly Iran's pronouncements, even particularly the previous leader, Supreme Leader Khamenei, who the US killed on February 28th, they have consistently said they will not have a nuclear weapon. The JCPOA that Mr. Trump walked out of in his first term begins with the line Iran does not have any intention, or words to that effect, to have a nuclear weapon. So the idea that this is a big takeaway from this deal begs two or three questions. One, if you didn't believe Iran the last time they said they wouldn't have a nuclear weapon, why do you believe them now? And if you have actually physically ended Iran's capability to have a nuclear weapon, then why bother to even have a deal with them? The second question, of course, that having walked out of the JCPOA once, Mr. Trump has to also prove that he will stick to this deal. The second part is that the Strait of Hormuz will be open. And as Ambassador Mohan Kumar said, that still remains to be seen exactly on what terms. We've already heard some voices in Iran suggesting that after the 30-day period, that this is all part of reports right now, Mehr News Agency, other American agencies that seem to have inside information on what that deal actually entails. But what we have seen them say is that once that 30-day period is over, they are going to set up a mechanism along with Oman, because Iran's consistent position has been, sure, Hormuz Strait for most part is free international waters, are over there, and ships, we are not stopping ships from going in them. But there is that, the closest point in the Hormuz Strait, which everybody is now familiar with that map, where Iran claims that there is no international water because both the territorial waters of Iran and Oman overlap, and there has been some talk of a joint mechanism over there. I can certainly tell you, Nidhi, from the Indian shippers I've spoken to, as well as international shipping agencies, while they're cautiously optimistic about this deal going through today, what they're saying to me is how are we going to send more ships in unless we have it in writing that Iran will allow them? And insurers will not want to put their money down on ships unless they have those. So my basic point would be, in terms of the takeaway, those are two things that honestly, would have been the same had this war not happened, had the US not walked out of the JCPOA already. The Hormuz Strait was open on February 28th.
Absolutely.
Subsequently, came down to maximum 5 ships going through, not just because of the US blockade. In terms of India's takeaways, and I will just be very brief here, but honestly, there have been three. One, India has consistently spoken about dialogue, diplomacy, the need to end this on the table, on the talks table, and not otherwise. So, in that sense, Prime Minister Modi has welcomed it. The second part is the reset that India is going to need to do, because regardless of how the US sees it, the rest of the world is really seeing that Iran stood up to the US after those debilitating attacks that, as Ambassador Gunter said, took out the Navy, took out this, took out that, took out their entire leadership, their national security advisor, apart from the supreme leader, but that Iran stood still, has fought back, and has got a deal on the talks table that doesn't look bad for them. I think the third question in India is going to be about the role of Pakistan. And having now successfully been a part of mediating this deal, and the kind of, if you like, reliance on the Pakistani leadership that Mr. Trump has shown throughout these few months, Pakistan and Qatar coming to that final deal yesterday. I think there are some misgivings in New Delhi about what this will mean for
that
Pakistan's role
actually
in the
that
region.
actually gives me a good, a good sort of point in which to ask Ambassador Mohan Kumar then about sort of the concerns for India here, and how concerned are you, Ambassador Mohan Kumar, that here we are, um, just a year after the Pahalgam terror attack, and how things have changed so dramatically in terms of the world's perception of Pakistan, its role, as Suhasini Haidar pointed out, in as a mediator, and also, your concerns about how India's relationship with the US, despite I think that attempts that were made to have some, attempt to repair it. You just had the Secretary of State here in India only recently, and yet we've seen the events of the last few days threaten to unravel any efforts to repair it.
So, two questions there, Nidhi. So,
Yeah.
one with regard to Pakistan and one with regard to the US. So, if you allow me on Pakistan, I tend to not see this role of Pakistan as being world changing or, tremendously important or anything like that. I think they've played usefully the role of a messenger or an interlocutor, and they have positioned themselves very cleverly, no doubt about it. What they may get in return is an IMF loan or two, or some financial assistance, or maybe even FATF support from the US. I don't know. But in terms of implication for India, I would say that we may have to look at our Pakistan policy and recalibrate it. Not a wholesale change, because our view of Pakistan is not undergoing any change. We believe what we believe. But I think, as you rightly said, how do we put this across to the world at a time when Pakistan has done what it has done? So I would say, yes, there needs to be a recalibration in terms of how we approach countries and how we really convey to them our views of Pakistan. As far as the US is concerned, my view is that there is a process of rapprochement which has begun. I think it began with the appointment of Ambassador Sergio Gore, and it then was consolidated a little bit by the arrival of Marco Rubio in Delhi. None of us thought that this would be a very smooth road. So I see this episode in the Strait of Hormuz as a bump in the road. I also want to draw the audience. I mean, most people don't realize that these are Indians, no doubt, and don't get me wrong. And I think that is a matter of deep regret that we have lost lives. But these are non-Indian ships, frankly, and it is international waters. Number three, We have 200,000 seafarers now. How are you going to protect all of them? This is a new issue for India. 20,000 seafarers in the Strait of Hormuz alone. So, this is a new issue for India. And I'm not trying to minimize the importance of what happened and the regret and regrettable as it is and so on. But I think India, just as we have 10 million people living in the Gulf, and you know they could come in harm's way, we now have a new issue: 200,000 seafarers and 20,000 alone in the Strait of Hormuz.
I think
And
I understand that. I think the issue here was the fact that and I'll get to Suhasini about this in just a moment, but that the Indian protest came, at least the strong part of it came much later. It was a belated sort of reaction. I mean, I can't imagine if this had happened under Dr. Manmohan Singh's government, and we saw how that government dealt with an Indian diplomat being stripped. And they, with the Devyani Khobragade episode, I mean, you had security barricades removed from outside the US embassy in Delhi. The government then really stood up to the Americans, and there was not a word of regret from the US Secretary of State that Indian lives had been lost, even if they wanted to convey that their blockade would remain in place. And so I want to ask Dr. Jeff Gunter about that despite the general optimism that I know you have for the India US relationship, um, I'm sure you would acknowledge that it's been a difficult year or so for this relationship, and it will require some work.
Yeah, and the work's already started. Let's not underestimate the relevance of the Quad. Let's not underestimate, like the esteemed ambassador just said, the importance of Sergio Gore. Sergio Gore is one of the most connected ambassadors and one of the most esteemed ambassadors in the entire diplomatic corps currently with President Trump. Marco Rubio being there not for 1 day, not for 2 days, but for 4 days, focusing on the Quad, talks about the importance and the fundamental relationship that we have, which is grounded in democracy. Whether it's Japan, Australia, India, America, that Quad relationship is going to be very strong going forward, not exclusively just based on our relationships and competition that we see with China, but the development of so many other aspects, whether it's maritime, whether it's military, whether it's technology. So to ignore or not acknowledge the fact that we're going to have a Quad coming forward, I hope that we're going to see a summit with the great leaders of the Quad as well. Don't underestimate that importance and that value. As far as Iran goes, and this has come up a few times, look it, they are not strong. They are currently negotiating with a gun against their head. They've been eliminated, they've been decimated. Obviously, at the end of the day, this is about the Iranian people, not the Iranian leadership. And when you have the people involved in these situations, you have to reach compromises, you have to reach a brighter future for all the parties. So what's going on right now is trying to navigate not only finishing off the possibility for Iran having a nuclear weapon and everything else that goes. We're trying to build a brighter future for the Iranian people. And the best example is World War II. We decimated Japan. What did we do? Japan now is part of the Quad. They're one of the great democracies. They're part of the G7, one of the great economic powers and democracies that we're seeing around the world. And guess what? Germany's in there too. The same thing has to go on with Iran. We have to eliminate the theocratic ayatollahs, eliminate their so-called governance of these people ultimately, and we have to build a better life for India, for America, and the Iranian people. Look at the regime killed.
Well, the Ayatollahs are still there, and I believe, I mean, you're saying
Still there. The Ayatollahs are still there, respectively.
but it was President Trump who threatened to destroy the Iranian civilization. I don't know why he did that.
It's rhetoric. Come on, it's rhetoric. You're watching the sausage being made. President Trump is a businessman, and he's a brilliant businessman.
President of the United States.
He's not going to do diplomacy the way you guys do diplomacy. Let's say he's buying a building in Manhattan. Is he going to sit there and say, "Oh, what an amazing building. I love this building. I want to pay more money for the building"? No, he's going to look at the business deal. He's going to put down the quality of the building while he continues dialogue with the principals. And that's why he has a great relationship with Xi. That's why he has a great relationship with Putin. And that's why he has an unparalleled relationship with your great Prime Minister Modi. It's a different form of diplomacy for all of us. And quite honestly, if you look at the 8 peace accords that we see around the world, the fact that Iran will never have a nuclear weapon and India will be a direct beneficiary of it, I think it'll be a great thing for all of us on this broad in the Indian people.
I'll give Suhasini sort of the last word as she's sort of taken in all of this. Suhasini, Haidar,
No,
From
I do
India,
want to.
yeah,
I
from
do want
India's
to make
reaction
that point.
yes, to the seafarers, to the American response. I mean, is this more than just a bump in the road?
Oh, absolutely. Let's remember that Prime Minister Modi is going to meet President Trump on Wednesday. They have not met since Prime Minister Modi went to Washington last February. And the relationship has literally come apart at the seams on a number of issues, whether it's trade, whether it's sanctions, whether it is the rhetoric, as Mr. Gunter puts it very euphemistically, that Mr. Trump is
Ambassador Gunter
employed
as
with
well.
India, calling India a dead economy, virtually writing it off in many ways. But it's also about what Mr. Trump has said more than 100 times on Operation Sindhu. Most recently, of course, Mr. Modi is going to that meeting under the very, very dark cloud. And you can see the kind of outrage across India about the killing of these three mariners. And regardless, I accept Ambassador Mohan Kumar's statement that these were not Indian ships. It doesn't matter. Each of those ships had only Indians on board. And those Indians made it very clear when they were speaking to the US Navy that they were Indians. The kind of treatment they got instead, the shooting of these ships, three ships, and one of them where tragically three of them died, showed that the US Navy doesn't care. You can say it's international waters, but then it isn't the US's waters. And the US doesn't get to decide that if somebody is breaking what it claims are illicit, are breaking US sanctions. Those are economic sanctions. They're not sanctions where you're supposed to shoot a ship and kill people on board. It's very simple that the anger in India is not just about the fact that the US decided that it can shoot whoever it wants, whenever it wants in those waters. It is also about the fact that in statement after statement, the US has pushed back on India's protests, has more or less has repudiated Mr. Jaishankar himself, who protested in that meeting, conversation with Mr. Rubio. And the US State Department came back and said, please remember, anyone who's violating our laws will not be tolerated. More or less, very undiplomatically escalating that situation. And thirdly, is essentially making the case that in the US can do all of this in the international waters. I'm so glad Ambassador Gunter spoke about the Quad. The importance of the Quad is in keeping a free and open Indo-Pacific, is in keeping safety, security, stability in the Indo-Pacific. The Gulf of Oman is in the Indian Ocean. And yet the US Navy has, for the first time since World War II, bombed an Iranian ship in the Indian Ocean, has also shot a number of ships, 9 ships in all, which they say they have disabled. 3 of those in the last week alone, in which 3 Indians have died. So if you're talking about the Quad, and I can speak separately about the Quad on a different occasion on where the US is really pushing back on all the ideas and all the common values that the Quad seemed to espouse in the past. The fact is, on each of these issues, it would seem as if the US has declared itself king of the world. And we have to either put up with it and gratefully accept the US's new laws and the US's new idea of world order, or stand to be bombed if we don't comply. Ambassador Gunter spoke about what the US did with Japan and Germany. I could remember Iraq. I could remember Afghanistan. I could remember a number of other countries that the US has, in fact, sought to improve and has left much worse off. So I'm just making the point
Yeah.
here that for Indians, this is not a small matter. It is not a matter that's just going to go away. And Prime Minister Modi is taking the weight of those expectations as he goes to meet Mr. Trump, as I said, for the first time in more than a year.
Well, we'll keep an eye on that. That meeting is tomorrow, or sorry, the day after
The
tomorrow.
day after.
Day after tomorrow. So we will see what the outcome of that is. India has been rather on eggshells, it seems, when it comes to dealing with this administration in particular. But thank you very much to all of you for joining us for a quick takeaway on today's important developments. Let's see where we go from here. Thanks very much.
Great to be here.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Well, joining us now on the program today is Ambassador Navdeep Suri, who has served as India's ambassador to the UAE, to Egypt, and to Australia, and knows the region very, very well. Ambassador Suri, thank you so much for being with us. Uh, Firstly, something that we reflected on in an earlier segment of this program were the sort of serious concerns about whether even this framework agreement would hold, even frankly, between now and Friday, and of course beyond. Uh, in your view, is there a real danger, even a possibility, even now, of things unraveling, particularly with the sort of belligerent stand that Israel has taken?
I think that possibility is there, and it really will be a test of wills for President Trump to impose himself this time on Israel, on Prime Minister Netanyahu. The criticism within Israel, even from some of Prime Minister Netanyahu's supporters, has been pretty brutal. And so I think Israel and certainly Prime Minister Netanyahu have an incentive to try and create trouble in Lebanon and see what they can do to unravel this agreement. And it'll be for President Trump to stand firm.
As far as the negotiations between the US and Iran are concerned now, um, where do you see that process going? I mean, are we looking possibly at endless talks now on Iran's nuclear program, where this ceasefire may just continuously be extended, and Iran will, press for concessions, in return for continuing the discussions, as it were? Is that a very likely outcome?
So I think, look, the Iranians have played their hand pretty smartly, and obviously, there was a complete breakdown of trust with the United States. So this time they are asking for upfront concessions before they relax their chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz, and so they want 50% of the frozen funds released. They want other indications, and. Uh, my sense is that some preliminary discussions have already begun. I read that teams of negotiators from Iran and the United States are arriving in Doha tonight, and that they will try and thrash out some of the initial issues in the run-up to the larger meeting on Friday and the signing on Friday. But I think for your viewers, Nidhi, there should be no doubt at all that what is being discussed now as the MOU is just an MOU. It is almost like an understanding to start serious negotiations on the more complicated subjects. And the best that this is doing is reopening the Strait of Hormuz and taking you back to the status that you had before the 28th of February. And that just reinforces the completely pointless nature of the US and Israeli attack on Iran and the wanton destruction that it has caused, not just to Iran, but to countries in the Gulf and to economies like ours and many others in Asia. Um, I think that the sense I have from previous rounds of discussions between the Iranians and the Americans is that Iran does tend to drag on negotiations. So I certainly wouldn't be holding my breath that within 60 days they will magically come to an agreement on some really complicated issues, including the whole nuclear issue, unless they were to copy paste from the JCPOA, which Trump had torn up in 2018, and which actually had taken 2 years to negotiate.
And well, you never know, that's what they may come back to and then sell it as something else, because it's a post-truth world, so you can sell pretty much anything. But finally, Ambassador Suri, about this war, and it exposed a lot of fault lines and sort of divisions even within Gulf nations. We saw that, and also India's own policy towards Iran, its sort of relationship with Israel. All of that has come under renewed focus. Does this war and what has happened now, will that force a recalibration, you think, of even the way India looks at its ties in the region now?
Look, I think it is inevitable that there will be a recalibration amongst the Gulf countries. You are increasingly seeing voices, particularly from Oman and from Saudi Arabia and Qatar, about the need for unified Gulf security posture, which can withstand, because I think there is also a recognition that they not only have to deal with Iran, which has demonstrated its power and its ability to close the Strait of Hormuz, but also in Israel, which is quite belligerent and expansionist, and so there is a and on top of that, the lack of effectiveness of the U.S. security umbrella. So all of that goes into the calculus of the Gulf countries as they reevaluate where they stand in terms of the position after the end of this conflict, if indeed it has ended. For India, I think that we will have to go back to um, recognizing that Iran is an indispensable element in the region. It is part of our near neighborhood, and you cannot compromise your relations with Iran just because you want to have a much closer relationship with the UAE and Israel and the United States. And I think that recalibration from our side is also in order, and I certainly hope that it happens sooner rather than later.
I think the key sentence, though, that you said is if this war does actually come to an end now. And that's what we have to see, particularly beginning with the next few days. Ambassador Suri, thank you very much for your initial takeaways on this framework memorandum of understanding. As you rightly said, we'll be back with much more in the next few days as the deal is actually signed in Switzerland. If that actually happens, what those implications will be, do join us then. Thank you.